Let's talk about health checks. Now, a health check, we're going to want to, of course, set up and monitor our cloud environment. Now, generally, as a developer, you're not really into monitoring and managing services a whole lot. However, this exam expects you to have that experience. And I'll be honest, a good amount of the exam, and especially the last part of the objectives around monitoring and management for the course, which is section 5, I think. But basically, just be aware that there's a lot here. Now, this objective in the first part of the exam objectives is pretty light, but we just want to talk about a few things. First of all, we may need to monitor our resources when we deploy them. Some of the resources we may want to monitor would be, for example, our load balancing. We may also want to consider too what part of load balancing we want to monitor. Is it, of course, the back end or the front end services? Again, we have to consider a few things there. When we monitor, we may want to set up what's called a workspace. Now, a workspace in Stackdriver is basically going to be a view. I like to compare it sort of like a project in Google Cloud, where you may have your account set up and you have 3 or 4 projects. And each of those projects are buckets of resources, for example. Now, you create a workspace and monitor all your projects, or create a workspace and only monitor some of your projects and resources. So think of the workspace as a way to get a specific view and a way to also monitor and manage your resources at the same time. We would go into Stackdriver and, of course, set up what is called an uptime check. Now, a health check is an uptime check. This is one of the areas on the exam that I thought was a little bit confusing, because some of the documentation refers to uptime, some of it refers to health check. But just be aware that an uptime check is a health check. That's really the same thing. Here's an example of how we could monitor, for example, our web services. For example, we could see their response by back end from cache, etc. Just one example. We'll be discussing this somewhat more in the Stackdriver section of the course. Here's an example of how to set it up. And again, just be aware, for example, that a health check is an uptime check. We would create this in the Stackdriver console, or we could do this via G-Cloud as well. To set up a G-Cloud command, it's simply G-Cloud compute health checks, create the type of health check that we want to create, and we could do it that way. If we want to learn more about it, we go to this document here. And there will be demos for Stackdriver. Because some of these objectives are redundant, we're going to cover Stackdriver in much detail in the last section of the course. Let's go ahead and move on to the test tips and focus on what we want to know for this specific objective.